Good evening and welcome to another edition of Filmnut. I am your host, Jeff Schubert. Glad you can join us. My guest tonight, script consultant Pilar Alessandra, is quoted as saying, "My goal is to take the mystification out of screenwriting." In my opinion, in her DVD, On the Page, Alessandra does just that. Her background includes being a senior story analyst for DreamWorks and Radar Pictures, an instructor with the UCLA Writers Program. She's trained writers and story analysts at ABC, Disney, Nickelodeon, and numerous writing conferences, including the American Screenwriting Association, the FTX Film and Television Festival, and Creative Screenwriting Magazine Screenwriting Expo, say that 10 times, where she's an annual star speaker. Here tonight as my star guest is Pilar Alessandra.
Hi.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, I love your DVD. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great tool for writers.
Great. I'm glad.
Now, so you've been involved either in the capacity of doing coverage, teaching, analyst for a lot of years. How many scripts would you say you've read?
I don't know. Thousands. Yeah.
Easily, right?
I've been doing this. I've been reading scripts, working on scripts for 15 years. I just aged myself, but you know, I'm still consulting with writers, maybe 1 or 2 writers a day. So yeah, you do the math.
Well, I've read my first script when I was like 10, so that doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. But yeah, so I would say quite a number.
Quite a number. What would you say then are some of the most common things that writers get right and that they get wrong in the scripts that you read?
Common things they get right and that they get wrong. You know, when they get it right, it's because they do something special. It's because they commit in a certain way to something that's unique, that's new. When they get it wrong, to me, is actually when they play it safe, when they're writing for everybody except themselves. You get bored very easily with a safe script, you know, no matter how technically sound it is.
Now, can everyone write?
Can everybody write? Some people have this natural gift. You know, the way they have a certain sense of poetry with pages, and I have seen first-time writers just nail it, right? But so not everybody has that. But can everybody craft a good screenplay? Eventually, yes. They can chip away, and it becomes a really good movie.
Now, yeah, because I mean, with your DVD, my thought process is, after watching your DVD, you can write a script. If you can't, now how good it is, right? That's another matter, and then you work on it from there.
Yeah.
But if you can't, I would say it would probably come down to writer's block, right? And writer's block, because the skills, you have such wonderful exercises that we'll cover, but writer's block, emotional, fear-based, or information-based, you run out of information. I know you do some great podcasts, and you had a guest on your show, Dr.
Darlene Menini, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. She came on the podcast, and one thing that she talked about, which is something that I try to deal with in the DVD and in my classes, she talked about this idea of just stop for a second and do one thing. Just focus on that one story you're trying to tell, maybe in a scene rather than big picture. Or you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm not responsible for writing Godfather, you know, the next Godfather right now. I am responsible for hitting 3 pages tonight. And if you sort of take the responsibility, take the weight off of your shoulders, hit one thing, I'm just gonna nail this scene and go to bed, great. You know, it's the fact that the writers, because they have these great imaginations, take the weight of the world on. They imagine all kinds of negative possibilities instead of just focusing on one thing.
I think another concept she got into was also the idea of, narrow it down. Don't think in terms of writing a whole script, think in terms of writing a page.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
Give yourself small, attainable goals.
Right, so like in my classes, I always sort of have these, I have this little 10-minute shtick. Right,
10-minute exercises. 20 10-minute exercises.
20 10-minute exercises on the DVD, but also in classes that came out of having done this with my writers in classes, where I'll say, all right, you know, we're going to work on this character, and we're going to work on this character in this way. Here's the tool. I want you to try it right now. And what I noticed was simply having them write and giving them 10 minutes to do it, a focused writing time, and saying no more than that, just 10 minutes. They would get so much done. So sometimes it's just allowing yourself, you know, a little focused time, and then saying it's okay, I don't have to do it all day, I can leave.
Right. And one of the things you work on with character, right? Every main character in a script has a flaw, right?
Sure.
So you want your writers to flush out what their flaw is, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of writing teachers have talked about, and we talk about this in literature as well. But this idea of a flaw, it doesn't have to be a fatal flaw. It's just what makes us human, and it's the thing that we connect with characters on the screen. So sometimes I'll start writers out from this, what's human about your character? Now that you know what that is, what kind of situation would your character be least comfortable in?
Right.
And then we take it from there, because that's always a great place to start a movie.
And then, follow up with the question, how would that character then behave in that scenario with that flaw?
Yeah, because usually they start off doing the wrong thing. And that's what's fun about a movie, because we're the audience, right? And we sit there and go, that was wrong,
right.
And we spend 2 hours watching this person who started off not doing it so well learn things that eventually help him do it right, and that's a movie.
So you mentioned now you've been doing this for about 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years.
15 years. Looking good.
Thanks.
Now, how would you say the field, or has it changed in those 15 years? Are there advantages, disadvantages to being a writer today versus 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, people are a lot more cautious. When I got into script reading, when I was script reading for Amblin and for DreamWorks, it was a really exciting time as far as the spec and the overnight read and the bidding wars in the morning. People just wanted the great big idea, and they were going to pay money for it. And what happened? They did pay a lot of money for it, and then they had to hire writers to rewrite some of those things, because they were buying it on idea, not always on writing. And sometimes they made, they spent a lot of money on things that didn't do that well, commercially or critically. Now people are a lot more cautious, especially because of the economy. So sometimes it's a little bit harder of a more difficult of a time for a writer. They can't just do it on idea. At the same time, it's really created more respect for the writing. People want a good read, not just a big idea. So I find it equally exciting of a time, but it is a little bit more difficult for the writer.
So difficult to sell on just a pitch, but if you actually deliver the goods and you have that, that's where it's...
People always get excited about a well-written script, something with great storytelling. Also, there's some interesting new opportunities for writers that certainly weren't around 15 years ago or even 5 years ago. Webisodes and writing for cell phone, and short-form content that can be seen on the net the way that the internet is right now. That may expand and expand, but right now it's short form, and there are executives out there that are looking through the internet and trying to find new writers all the time. And these are, not big studio, proven produced writers. These are writers at home who are just hammering out content and maybe putting it up on the net. So it's a whole new range of opportunities for writers, definitely.
Great, and you cover some of that specifically in one of your podcasts as well, new media opportunities and so forth,
I've been trying, in my podcast, I've been trying to bring new media people on because I need to learn about this.
Is it a different writing structure?
Well,
you're writing maybe 3-minute bits, 20-minute bits?
Yeah, there's that sort of, they talk about that sweet spot of 2.5 to 5 minutes. The basic sort of principles of writing are the same. You're going to hit them with something in the beginning, you're going to involve them in the middle, and then you're going to surprise them in the end, but we're going to do it a lot quicker. Yeah. I'm just interested when I have my guests on as to, well, how did they get it out to people, and also, how are they creating a career as a writer? Ultimately, the writer wants to make money. How are they, how is their story getting out there?
Is the 3-act structure the same today as it was 10 or 15 years ago, or has that evolved? I know on your DVD you talk about 120 pages used to be the standard script. Now maybe it's more 100 to 110.
Yeah, it's definitely shorter. I mean, I don't teach with a 120-page model. The average script comes in at 110, so that when I'm teaching, I usually actually have people think 100. And that way you can think in sort of 25-minute chunks, and it's actually easier to get through. It's going to help you with the writer's block. But I think that's also because we have been told stories, we've watched so many stories, that our mind takes certain shortcuts. The minute that we see a bank robber in a certain situation, we don't have to see all the stages of the bank robbery. We've been there, we know. So now we're going to jump to something new. And so the pacing of movies is different, but it's because we're trying to get to new story beats. So yeah, it's still the same structure. It's a little bit tighter.
You break Act 2 up into like 2A and 2B, right?
I do. Well, a lot of times when I was reading scripts for studios, there was this vast wasteland of Act 2, where somebody was just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I think, a lot of teachers have taught this, and a lot of great producers. It's also instinct for a lot of good writers, which is that you get to that midpoint of a movie and things change up a little bit. They start to push forward in a new way. Characters that have come into the script start interacting with other characters and messing with the main character. So it's got to change, and that's what makes Act 2B a little bit different from Act 2A.
Okay. We have a message board question from Randall. He would like to ask you, supernatural mystery horror as a genre seems to have a different flow to the plot structure and the way central questions appears compared to most other genres. Can you comment or discuss this?
Supernatural mystery horror.
He has an example.
Okay.
For example, in the recent film Taken, we have the classic central question appearing at the quintessential 25% turning point. Oh, we got a real writer here,
Oh,
huh?
my Lord.
But in many supernatural thrillers, what often happens is that there is a gradual revelation of paranormal events with a gradual revelation of the central question. Will the protagonist solve the mystery that is unfolding?
You guys are going to have to fill in some gaps for some of us here. Hi, I'm Brian. You didn't watch the pre-show if you're watching on demand. Fill in some gaps here and then answer the question, maybe.
As I was reading it, I'm just hoping Pilar understands this question.
This is a bit of a handful. I mean, I think without going home and studying this question, I don't know if I can answer everything. I don't necessarily think it has that much of a different structure, and we're still, think about any genre. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. Things are, tighter, scarier, more suspenseful in the genres that he's talking about. I can't address, without hearing it again, I can't address his question of what happens to the protagonist. But I do think that the thriller horror genre has introduced a different kind of storytelling that's really interesting, which is this idea of the contained thriller, the contained horror, the challenge of what happens if you get a group of people in one place and then you sort of assault them with horrifying things, with scary things, threatening things. And it really actually challenges the writer because they're stuck in that place and they have to come up with new ideas. So sometimes it feels like it has a different structure, but we're still sort of in this beginning, middle, end place.
Right.
I want to make it clear that I'm not hung up on 3-act structure. I believe in beginning, middle, and ends and knowing what those are, but I also think it's exciting that we have taken this standard linear way of telling a story, and that once we've sort of nailed it, we've chopped it up into pieces, and we're not scared to tell stories backwards or to start at the end and then work our way back up to that event. I know this doesn't answer your question about the genre, but I'd also say if I could give you a more specific answer if you email me, and then I can read it over and then I can be smarter about it.
What you said reminds me of the old 8th grade English teacher telling the class, learn the rules of grammar, and then you can break them.
Well, I think the 8th grade English teacher should have told you to break them.
Right.
She usually just tells you the rules.
Right.
And then as a writer, you discover, wow, I know all that. What happens if I purposely break one? So.
Cherry Pie would like to ask, when teaching, is there one thing that you stress to your students to do that would make them a successful writer or a script writer?
Is there one thing that I would stress? In the class, Cherry Pie, there's a whole bunch of writing tools that will make them better at crafting certain elements of their screenplay. I mean, that's my job, is to give you the tool and let you run with it. But overall, where I see a lot of students stop being students and start becoming successful commercial writers is where the confidence kicks in, basically. Confidence to the point of of sort of an endearing arrogance sometimes. This idea that, you know what, my story's better than anybody else's story, and I'm going to get it out there. Or, yeah, that last one didn't work so well, somebody didn't like it, too bad, I'm working on the next one. That is the one thing that I try and leave people with at the end of class, to say, you know, I can teach you all these craft things, but you have to go out there and have a thick skin and pursue and do it. So a little arrogant confidence, that would be my
It's a great
trick.
anecdote to fear, which is the cause of writer's block, or a cause of it. So there you go. It makes sense that confidence would be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Dialogue, that's one thing that you intentionally like to save for last when you teach. Why?
Yeah. Well, I love great dialogue. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of people hang their story on their dialogue rather than letting the dialogue come out organically, because their story took their characters into a certain place, and those characters are now sort of, they have to say what they say. And that's always a more realistic place to take characters. It feels better when you're watching it or when you're reading it. So I deal with dialogue last. But between us, it's my favorite thing to teach. It is. It really is. I can't wait to get to that class, you know? And I know the writers who love writing dialogue are like, when are we going to talk dialogue? But it's like, sorry, you got to get your story down first.
Well, staying with dialogue for a second, then what's the difference in showing and telling with dialogue?
Showing and telling, well, you know, there's that whole exposition thing, right, that drives everybody crazy. Whether you're an audience member, whether you're a reader.
I believe you referred to the exposition as the death of a script.
Sure, absolutely. Suddenly somebody's telling you either what you should have seen, what you're about to see, or sometimes what you are seeing. You know, it's the ultimate dumbing down of a script. You don't need to explain something that you could show. Now, on the other hand, sometimes people are so scared to have the direct statement that I'll read scripts and I'll say, wow, this is really interesting and so cryptic and stuff. What is happening? You know, every once in a while, a cop might just say, we think the killer is so-and-so, you know?
Right.
Or a man might say to a woman, I love you. But it may take a while to get there.
So when you say show, if you show the person dead, you don't have to say he's dead.
Right.
Is that right?
Oh my God, he's dead.
Right?
Yeah.
He's dead, Jim. A Star Trek flashback just, hit me. That was for Brian. Bates would like to ask, do you recommend writers read a lot of scripts? What are your favorites to recommend? Are there any you'd recommend as bad examples as far as what not to do?
I am not going to go into the trap of telling you what movies I do or don't like. Okay. But I do recommend that you read as many scripts as possible. Also, try and read things that you really like that were written in the past 5 years, because the look and feel, the formatting of a script has changed. You know, we don't use camera direction anymore. It's much more in the moment. So really look at contemporary scripts as well as the classics. Sometimes people will say, well, I read Casablanca and Chinatown, and be like, that's great. You know, what have you read that's current as well?
Is it as helpful, or does it make a difference to read scripts of movies you haven't seen versus movies that you've seen?
It can be helpful. There's something called the Blacklist. I don't know if you know about it. The Blacklist is a list that's put out by all the studio executives of their favorite reads that year. That doesn't mean that those scripts were made or necessarily will be made. They got the attention of the executive. They brought the writer into the room. They loved the read. And it is interesting for writers to try and get their hands on scripts like that. They may not have been read, but they got somebody's attention in a way that says, okay, this may be how I break into Hollywood. You know, people should know that, a spec is the script that they're writing isn't necessarily something that's always going to be made. What you're aiming for is work. You want to use it as your calling card to get work.
Absolutely. Brian, the DP has a question.
No, I have a DP question.
Oh, okay.
I have a DP. You just mentioned, and I want to touch on this, that newer scripts do not include camera direction. And lately, when I've been given a script, I have a couple things I'm shooting in the future. Mm-hmm. I hate when I'm reading a script and it says like camera pans down, and I'm just like, that's not your job. Just tell me where we are and what they're saying. And I remember reading the Fight Club script. Fight Club is one of my favorite movies. If you read that script, it's almost impossible to see how they got from that script to to the movie you're watching, because the only thing the script has is where are we and what the dialogue is, and everything else is brought up upon the imagination of the crew that you get involved. So what are your feelings on that? You're saying new ones don't have that, but how do you do it?
Well, Brian, I'm so glad you brought that up, because Pilar has come up with a great end around for DPs like you and directors. So,
all right.
so how can you direct without directing in your screenplay?
Absolutely, you direct without directing. You know, you're right. This idea of, you know, close up on, you know, pan to, it's emotionless, really. You know, what is the emotion that you're bringing home? So if you say, you know, close up on Jeff's face, you know, that means nothing, because in the pages I go, okay, I wonder what Jeff is feeling. But if you say Jeff's face fills with fear, you know, Jeff's face fills with excitement, okay, now it's emotional, and the camera, of course, is going to go close up in order to get that look on your face. So that's the little trick.
So you're not pissing off Brian, and yet you're getting what you want at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if they want to change it, of course they can on set, but you haven't tipped off as being like an unprofessional writer or writer. You haven't annoyed anyone.
Absolutely, you're still telling the story, and you're guiding a shot. The candle flickers versus close up on the candle. You know, of course, to get that flickering candle, we're going to go close up. There's a real marriage. I mean, the director or the DP, you know, wants to feel that they understand the writer's intention, and then they can take that intention and do what they will. But I think they get just as frustrated by something that just says, you know, there is a candle, you know, or, you know, close up on. It means nothing.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about dialogue and story. What do you find writers have more of a challenge with or trouble with?
Dialogue or story. They have the most trouble with story. It's really hard to come up with new plot points and keep it fresh and new takes on things. You know, that's why I'm consulting on it, and you don't see me doing it, right? You know, so that is where they have the hardest job, because you know, an audience is always challenging them on that. You know, oh, I've seen that before. I want something new, or surprise me. Dialogue, yes, it's hard to make that authentic sometimes, but there are little things that you can do where you get in the rhythm of how a character speaks, and it can get easier and easier.
It's funny because, you know, I like to write, and yeah, I'll be sitting there 10 minutes, 20 minutes, hour and a half. See, an idea comes into my mind, you know, coming up with the story idea is for me personally, is the challenge. And then once it does, then all the, you know, the dialogue comes very naturally.
Right.
Another dialogue question: how do you feel writers do in terms of writing how people do talk? You know, you mentioned authentically. In other words, if you go into an ice cream store, you might just say strawberry.
Right.
You won't say, you know, I would like to have a strawberry ice cream. You don't always say that. How do you feel writers do with that writing?
You just edited a line really well. And that is, you know, half of what I do when I'm consulting with people is I'm going through and I'm scratching things out. I'm changing, I would like to have a strawberry ice cream, into strawberry. And once writers get the hang of, you know, that's how we talk. We talk in partial sentences and in code sometimes. It actually means less work for them. And they get it after a while. But it is something that sort of has to click for you.
Let's see, Delves a lot would like to ask, why do you think sequels are generally not as good as the original? Do the writers run out of creativity?
Oh, Delves a lot says that. Delves a lot, you got a really good point. I think that they're not as good because they become franchise projects. That sometimes the sequel is developed around something that sold really well. Maybe a character that stole the show, rather than something that's really taking the mythology, taking what really worked for the entire story and creating a new chapter. You know, sometimes they'll just say like, well, I loved it when that guy had that stock line. We're just gonna fill it with those stock lines, you know? Or we're gonna make sure it has these number of set pieces because that worked the first time. And then it just becomes, you know, all tricks, and it's not a new story, something that takes us to a new chapter.
Relying on a formula.
Yeah,
sounds like.
absolutely.
Yeah, because, you know, in TV, like, shows go on for hours and hours and hours, seasons and seasons and seasons.
Yeah.
So it's not like it should be that hard, you would think, to take the characters and put them, but I guess for some reason in film it's harder and different.
Yeah, we gotta, you know, I don't know. Maybe it is that with good TV shows, they're taking on a life of their own. I think any writer on a TV show starts saying, we didn't expect our character to do this, but now that they're doing this, we decided to have an episode that went in that direction, or what if, what would be the worst case scenario with this, and it allows them to be so imaginative. I've been getting locked into TV a lot these days, probably because I have kids, and
Right.
But there's some really exciting stuff going on, I think.
Great. Kings of ... Are short films subject to the same rules of writing as full length? Do you recommend anything differently?
The thing I would recommend with short film is, well, sort of two approaches. Either you've got a high concept and you're mining it, in 10 or 15 minutes. You're sort of what-ifing from the top. This guy wakes up and he's this, and then we spend 10 minutes with the fun of that. That could be an interesting short film. Or the second approach is that we're building to one shocking, surprising, delightful reveal at the end. If you're not doing either one of these things, it could be very day in the life, and we could sort of leave it thinking, and what? So I'm usually saying, if you're going to invest your time and your money, get us, with some kind of hook, either all the way through or right at the end.
Now, another one of your guests on your podcast was Carl Iglesias,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
you talked about writing for emotional impact, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked was he included concepts like curiosity, things that you wouldn't associate with being emotions as falling under the anticipation, I
Yeah.
think was another one.
Yeah. I think that book resonates with so many people, and that approach resonates with so many people because they've heard for so long, don't direct an actor on the page. Don't, they think that they're supposed to be emotionless in pages, and you're not. You need to convey emotion because emotion tells story. There's a completely different story with somebody being scared by something versus somebody being thrilled by something. So that idea of that even curiosity is an emotion. It says what's the emotion of the scene. That's probably for Carl to teach.
Right.
But we actually sometimes we teach a class together, and I think our process they're very compatible because we do approach the pages this way.
So a new writer comes up to you and says, "I've never written before. I've got a great idea. What should I do?"
You should come to On the Page.
That's right.
What should they do? I usually say, and then what? They'll give me a great logline, and I'll say, that is a really good logline, and then what? So if they can say, well, then this, great. That tells me, great, you're on your way to a movie. If they say, well, that's it, like, all right, I want you to go back, and I want you to, and then what for a while until you see the movie emerge. So that's what I would tell them is, keep building, and if the ideas keep coming to you, by all means, write it down. It's a screenplay.
And then what should the goal be of the first draft?
The goal of the first draft is to finish the damn thing, right? So many people start and they want it to be perfect, and they get frustrated with themselves, and they stop, and they've got 5 incomplete screenplays in their closet, and they hit a shrink, right? So save yourself the shrink time and allow yourself to be terrible for a while. And even if you have to mark it with something really exciting happens here, I don't know what it is, but I want to get to the next place, fine. Mark it and then move on to the stuff that you do know. Just finish it.
Yeah, I kind of half jokingly was going to ask you, can you teach me to write a bad script? Because that's what a first draft, really is. I've written 8 feature-length screenplays, a bunch of spec sitcoms, and some other things. And I feel like I'm a better writer on the 8th one than I was on the first one, but what they all have in common is all the first drafts are pretty bad. I thought they were really good when I first wrote the end,
Yeah.
but then upon further reflection, so yeah, just accept that out there, that first draft, it's just about getting it on the page.
Right, absolutely. That's why I called my business On the Page, because I just wanted people to
There
stop.
you go, I didn't even realize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted them to stop thinking so much about, it was all about theory and concept, and they kept sort of wrestling in here, and I was like, could you put it here? Just do it. And once they did, it was a very freeing experience. But it is just the beginning. Got to go back and rewrite.
So my 2 favorite words in the literary lexicon for me is the end. I'm very excited when I type those two words after I struggled with it, what have you. So what should my next step be at that point? I finished my first draft, I typed the end. Should I send it off to you for advice right away? Should I work on it some more myself first, get feedback from friends, writers groups? What do you think?
I usually tell people before they send it to somebody like me, somebody they're going to have to pay, they need to take it as far as they can take it. Some people just want to hand it to me and say, you know, you did the rewrite.
Make it good, Pilar.
Right, exactly. and I'll say, you know, well, have you done as much as you can? Does it meet your intentions? If they say no, I'll be like, try and make it meet your intentions first, because I'm going to come through and I'm going to give you some pretty big notes. If you haven't taken it as far as you can, you know, and I just hear, oh, I was going to do that, you've wasted your money.
So do that first. And then get the better advice after that.
Absolutely. Then we can really go to the craft of the page, you know, the nuances, all the stuff that makes a script really cool. As far as giving it to your friends goes, just take your friends. You know, because you know, if you have hurt feelings easily, you know, and you give it to a friend who doesn't have the right language to use for why it's not working for him, there goes your friendship. So just be really careful with that.
Yeah, and well, take that one step further and talk about the importance of a writer having thick skin, though, and being able to take that feedback.
Yeah, I think that's where that little confidence, that little touch of arrogance really helps. Because the writers who do become successful, they have this thick skin where, you know, they've given it to 20 people, 19 people have said, I don't get it, you know, and one person said, I get it and I want to run with it. And they didn't listen to those other 19 people, you know, they were waiting for the person, the audience member who connected with them.
Well, and the beauty of that is, and something I keep reminding myself, is if you take the best of the best, the most popular of the most popular when it comes to TV, movie, music, whatever it is, they're still only liked, watched by a very small percentage of the overall population.
Yeah.
So if the best of the best is only liked and admired by a small percentage of the population, where does that leave the rest of us? So of course, a lot more people aren't going to get, like, be into, for whatever the case may be. Part of being a good writer is knowing your audience when you're writing your material, right? And how to target it and so forth.
Absolutely. You know, and you know, as an analyst, I think my job is to always think like a great fan of whatever genre I'm reading. So even if it isn't a movie that I would go out to see, I got to think like, you know, okay, you know, I am a 25-year-old sci-fi guy who goes to Comic-Con, right? I have to like think that way. What am I expecting from a great movie? Now, if you're writing a movie like that, you're not going to give it to a certain production company that makes, you know, the 2009 version of Terms of Endearment. So, you know, you have to know who your audience is, like you said, and target it to the right people.
Great. We have another instant message. Dave, do you have a preference in screenwriting software between Movie Magic and Final Draft? Is there any good free software you'd recommend?
Okay.
Let's stick to the first half. Final Draft and Movie Magic.
You know, the only reason I recommend Final Draft is because I've used it. You know, and so but I haven't used Movie Magic. I'm sure it's just as good. What you want to do, if you're a writer, is you need some kind of software, and all software does is it doesn't do story for you. It just indents for you. It indents, it capitalizes, so that you don't have to think about that kind of stuff. So I would say any software that you have is probably going to work for you as a writer. I mean, in the industry, I think the Final Draft may be the one that's used the most, but I really can't say. I'm sure something, you know,
something that conforms to industry standards is important, because I don't know if snobbery is the right word, but if you don't do things in the proper format, you kind of tip yourself off as not being an industry regular, if you will, and that can turn some people off.
There are some people, I mean, it's hard. Industry format is so easy. I mean, we're just talking 12-point courier.
Right.
You know, so for me, I may just not be a stickler on it. If it looks like a script page, it is a script page. I can't guarantee that doesn't mean that there aren't certain readers out there that won't, you know, sort of measure your margins.
Right.
But I also am always skeptical. If somebody's reading your script that way, how much attention are they paying to the story?
Right.
You know, so yeah, I'm not a stickler for it, but I'd say Final Draft, Movie Magic, they both work well. And if there's a great software out there that is being invented and you find out about it, email me. I want to know.
Okay, well, my executive producer is a little more frisky than usual tonight. Brian, what do you got?
I just wanted to butt in again. She says final draft. I'm going to agree with final draft, and here's why. There's other script writing tools that do this, but as an assistant director, as an AD, the person that breaks the script down, I'm going to like you a lot more if you have your final draft. Now there's added things you can do. You can pretty much you can tag locations, props, and items in there. So I can generate a report out of final draft, and I can use that in my breakdown software. So every time scene A comes up, I know there's this table and this kitten or this prop, and you can break down those elements in Final Draft. So if you're using that, the AD and the other people and the script supervisor, all those people are going to like you a lot more, particularly in an indie capacity where maybe they don't have the budget, so everyone can spend the time breaking all those things down. So that's another reason I would just back up your recommendation of Final Draft.
Thank you so much.
That was a good answer.
Yeah.
Why isn't he sitting here?
That's right.
But, yeah, that was really good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now, okay, someone does come to you, they are ready, they've developed it a little bit more, they come to you for coverage. What can they expect? How do you break down a script for them?
Okay. Just want to sort of define what coverage is versus notes, because I don't do coverage, but you're going to hear the term coverage a lot. What script coverage is something I used to do for the studios. It's a book report. You're reading a script, and then you're telling the executive what kind of a script you just read, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and whether it would make a good movie. A coverage is very definitive. It's very judgmental. When I was doing it, my husband's nickname for me was Crusher of Dreams. So now what I do, because that's not nice, now what I do is script notes, and that's what analysts and that's what script consultants should be doing. They're not just telling you it is or isn't a movie, they're saying this is how you fix it. They're going into it page by page or line by line even, and saying, here's the things that I notice. So that's what I do, is I'll look at a script, I'll talk to the writer about the big picture issues first, and then I go through it with them sequence by sequence, and sometimes we even script doctor right there on the spot.
And then what happens? They go and they make those changes. Do they come back to see you? Do they resubmit it?
Well, sometimes I leave it to them, because then they got to pay me all over again. Right. Sometimes they'll run with it and they'll make the changes, and they don't need me. Sometimes they'll feel like, no, I need a second read. I would say about 50% of people make changes, come back, and then we can tweak it even more.
Would you say a majority, or how does your customer breakdown? Do you mostly work with new writers, more established writers?
I would say about 75% in my classes, my big classes, are new writers, because a lot of people are, they're trying to break story or they're trying to rewrite. But I have 25% that are successful writers that still even take class with me, because they want some new tools, they want to streamline their process, so they just want to be in class again and get that energy behind them.
I'm smiling because if and when my next script gets a pass from someone, because of your husband, I'm going to think of the Crusher of Dreams.
Crusher of Dreams.
That's going to stay
That's
with
right. You just have that little mantra. Whatever, Crusher of Dreams.
That's right.
Yeah.
Batman, the Cape Crusader, is tuning in this evening. My first draft is 148 pages long. Will industry read a script that is more than 120 pages?
No. No, and please don't give it to me either. That's your first sign, to go in and you haven't done everything that you can do. You need to go in and you need to take yourself in hand and say, what can I part with? You've heard that thing about killing your babies. Such a lovely, think about it as, your precious darlings instead. Get rid of your precious darlings. At least one of them, there it is. Your script is actually going to be better for it. So yeah, please, 120 pages and under.
Yeah, well, again, keeping in mind that the standard is, I guess, one page represents a minute of screen time. 148 pages is about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And how many movies do you see in the theater that are 2.5 hours in length? And I bet the ones that you do see that are of that length are by megastar directors or big event movies with massive budgets. They're not first-time or second-time indie writers.
But also,
the
script may not have been that long. That may have been the interpretation of the director that suddenly wants to sort of, take the landscape and go wide with it and really spend time and wants to slow it down and have those looks and stuff. That doesn't mean that the script was that long. That means the director has chosen a certain pace. And that would be wonderful. So yeah, I do get that question a lot. Well, what about these 3-hour movies? it was probably the process of the filmmaking rather than a big, dense, overwritten script.
Now, for the aspiring writer who reads books, who takes seminars, watches DVDs, does all that kind of stuff, and gets all these rules and gets the coverage, and their script is not going to get considered because of this reason, that reason, the other, what do you say to that cynical writer who says, yeah, but I go to the movies all the time and I don't see inciting incidents within the first 5 minutes, and I don't see all these rules that my script is getting rejected for apply to most of the movies I see?
Your script's probably not getting rejected because your script's not getting rejected because you didn't follow the rules. Your script's probably getting rejected because we can see it. It's like with an actor, when you can see the process, you can see them acting,
Right.
it doesn't work for you. When it seems effortless, like they're being, that's when it's really working. So it's the same thing with a script. You don't see the inciting incident. That's because it was so beautifully crafted. It's subtle, it's organic, it's authentic. Kudos to that writer for making you think it wasn't there.
Right.
So I would also say, once you know those rules, just like you said, get off of it. It doesn't matter anymore. It's something to keep yourself in check, to get a basic understanding of structure and how myths have affected storytelling, all those things. But after a while, it's just you and your characters and your idea. And that is what should really run the show.
Well, even in, I'll give a little bit away, in the Q&A on your DVD, I think one of your students was asking you, do you have to do the exercises in order or write this particular way? And you were saying, no, do it in a way that works best for you.
Absolutely.
Cherry would like to ask, in the age of reality TV and post-writer's strike, in your opinion, do you think it's harder to get a script seen and produced?
Yeah, well, definitely TV these days, with the writer's strike especially. But an interesting thing has happened that's good for the TV writer, which is that people are interested in original pilots where they never used to be before. Never. It used to be that original pilots, they were all in-house, but now they are open to reading them. Sometimes they're open to reading them just as writing samples, but it just says that there is some room for you as far as creating original works on television. But yeah, reality TV has dominated a lot. My husband actually writes for reality TV. And on the other end of this, a lot of my writers get work as reality TV writers because there's still somebody who has to craft the story that comes out of the reality. So you could look at it as the death of storytelling, or you could look at it as a different kind of storytelling, because I'll make you a bet that you're hooked on a certain reality show too. We all are, Like we were watching Kitchen Nightmares till dawn last night. We've been taping the BBC version. I can't stop watching, this guy just yell at people. I'm addicted to it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Fill in these sentences for me.
Okay.
Good writers have this in common.
Good writers have, oh God, I had such a good one before. Now, good writers have a love of their craft in common. They're not just chasing the monetary benefits. So good writers have a love of their craft.
And 5 good habits of writers are?
5 good habits of writers. I was also figuring this out. I was like, okay, 5. All right, so here they are. Yes, I love the craft. That's one. The second is a certain discipline with their writing. A certain writing routine. A writing routine. Now, that doesn't have to mean every single day. You may not be that kind of writer. You might be that binge purge writer, but you know that you're going to purge on a weekend. You're going to binge on a weekend.
Right.
You're
going to throw up all your writing.
Yeah, you're going to just indulge, on a Saturday and a Sunday. That's when you're going to write. Or you're going to write at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. But a certain routine with their writing. I would say also that they're not afraid to be bad or to be silly, as number 3. And number 4 is that thick skin that we talked about. Oh, and number 5 was beautiful, but it's out of my head. Oh my God, what was it? You'll have to come to my classes to find out number 5. I don't know.
Take good
so
notes?
Good. That was it.
Oh, get out of here.
Dude, that was so good. Yes, yes. I just said dude.
That's okay.
That was wrong. Can you cut
That was very spontaneous.
Can't cut that out.
Can't
It's
cut
live,
that out.
right? Yeah, number 5, actually it was take notes. So let's reverse it for a second. Number 4 is take notes, but number 5 is to still be able to play and be creative.
I'm glad my sarcasm can come in handy. So now, real quickly, I want to go over a few things that you're doing. Well, first, what are some of the things that people learn in your DVD, some of the headlines?
Some of the headlines would be, they're going to learn an outlining process that is not going to be a 25-page outline. They're going to learn to go from premise into pages in a very quick, streamlined fashion that still gets their major story beats in there, scene activity, and is true to their characters.
Great. And this seminar at the end of the month, that is going to be about?
Yeah, it's about scene work. It's about all the cool stuff in scenes, from those great lines of dialogue, those wonderful character moments, the blow of a scene, like what is the scene really about, and how scenes tell great stories. And I'm going to be using a lot of film examples.
And where do people go to find out about that?
That is something I'm doing through Creative Screenwriting, and you can go to the Creative Screenwriting magazine website, and that will be in Beverly Hills on Sunday, July 26th, I believe.
Now, for people watching this in the archives, you do this a few times a year, so you can always go to the website of Creative Screenwriting to see when the next time you'll be teaching?
Actually, there is a screenwriting expo that I'm at every year, but what they should really go to, if you're not here and you can't get the July 26th class, is go to onthepage.tv, because that has everywhere I'm going to be. Like, I'm going to be in New York, July 11th. I'll be teaching a rewrite class, and I also teach 6-week classes out of my studio in Sherman Oaks if you are here, and I offer things online, online tools, things
so
like that.
So onthepage.tv, that is your website.
That is my website. It's where you find everything.
And you can also link to all your podcasts from there too. There's
Yeah. There's a little podcast link, but you can also find the podcast on iTunes, and it's called On the Page. Everything's on the page.
That's right.
Yeah.
So good deal. It's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great information. I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. That is going to do it for this edition of Filmnut. I want to strongly encourage any established writer, existing writer, new writer, someone thinking about writing, to check out her website, get her DVD if you're even remotely thinking about it. It's great. I'm looking forward to using it as the basis of writing my next script. And that's about it. I can't endorse it anymore. See you guys next time on Filmnut.
Huh?